The combine stopped on the worst morning of the year. Not harvest season. Planting season. May 3rd, 6 a.m. The kind of Iowa morning that smells like possibility. Cold dew on black soil, early light coming flat across the fields, the particular stillness that exists for exactly 1 hour before a farm comes fully alive. Tom Briggs had been in the cab of his John Deere S790 combine since 5:30, running the final pre-season checks before the planting push began. The S790 wasn't being used for harvesting today. It was being used to run the field conditioner attachment, breaking up the heavy clay clods that a wet April had left behind on his north fields. 300 acres of ground that needed to be worked before the planter could go in. The planting window for corn in Boone County, Iowa was not a suggestion. It was a countdown. Every agronomist, every extension agent, every farmer who had ever watched a yield map at the end of October understood the same thing. Plant before May 15th or accept a yield penalty. Plant after May 20th and the penalty became serious. Plant after May 25th and you were farming for break even at best. Tom had 300 acres of unworked ground and 12 days to plant it. He needed the S790 running today. He needed it running yesterday. The machine had come through winter storage without issues. He had checked it himself in March, run it for 2 hours, gone through every system. It had been fine. It was not fine now. The engine started normally. The displays came up clean. He engaged the separator and the feeder house and began moving across the north field. For 4 minutes everything was exactly as it should be. Then the feeder house drive made a sound. Not a catastrophic sound. Not a grinding or a snapping. A rhythmic, irregular sound. A skip, almost, like something rotating was not quite round, catching on something with every revolution. Tom backed off immediately. He shut down the feeder house. He climbed down and looked at the feeder house drive assembly. He could see nothing obviously wrong. He started it again. The sound was still there. He called the John Deere dealership in Ames at 6:47 a.m. He got the service department voicemail. He left a message that communicated, in the careful language of a farmer who does not want to seem panicked but is, in fact, panicked, the urgency of his situation. The service department called back at 7:53. They dispatched a technician. The technician arrived at 9:15. His name was Drew. 24 years old. 18 months with the dealership. He was thorough and earnest, and he ran every diagnostic the S790's onboard system could provide. He found fault codes related to the feeder house drive system. He called the dealership's senior technician. The senior technician arrived at 11. His name was Craig. 31 years old. 6 years of experience. He ran additional diagnostics, called John Deere's technical support line, and spent 40 minutes on the phone with a specialist in Moline, Illinois. At 12:30 p.m., Craig walked to where Tom was standing at the edge of the field. "Mr. Briggs," Craig said, "the fault codes are pointing to the feeder house drive shaft assembly. Specifically, we're seeing irregularity in the drive engagement that suggests either a worn drive shaft coupler or a problem with the feeder house reverser gearbox." "Which one?" Tom said. Craig hesitated. "We can't determine that without disassembly. And the disassembly needs to happen at the shop. The reverser gearbox on the S790 is not a field-serviceable component." "How long?" Tom said. Craig looked at his tablet. "We'd need to get the machine to the shop today. Tear down tomorrow morning. Parts order, if it's the coupler, we might have it in stock. If it's the gearbox," he paused. "The S790 reverser gearbox is on nationwide backorder. 8 to 12 days. Tom looked at his north fields. 300 acres. 12 days to planting deadline. 8 to 12 days for a part. He did the math that no farmer ever wants to do. "There has to be another way," Tom said. Craig shook his head slowly. "The John Deere diagnostic system is very clear on this. The reverser gearbox is showing stress indicators that—" "I don't care what the system is showing," Tom said. "I care about 300 acres that need to be in the ground in 12 days. Craig looked at him with genuine sympathy and no additional solutions. Tom walked away. He stood at the edge of his north field for a long time. He looked at the black Iowa soil. Rich, flat, perfect. The kind of ground his grandfather had called the best dirt God ever made. The kind of ground that rewarded a man who worked it right and punished a man who missed his window. He was going to miss his window. Unless... He pulled out his phone and called his neighbor Dale Hoffman. Dale was 68 and had farmed the section west of Tom's place for 35 years. Dale knew everyone in Boone County who had ever touched a piece of farm equipment. "Dale," Tom said, "I need a name." "What kind of name?" "Someone who knows the S790 feeder house drive system. Not a dealer technician. Someone who actually knows it." Dale was quiet for a moment. "There's one man," Dale said slowly. Tom waited. "But it's complicated," Dale said. "He doesn't work for the dealership anymore. Hasn't for 3 years." "Why not?" Dale exhaled. "That's his story to tell. His name is Walter Puit. He lives out on Hickory Ridge Road, about 12 miles east of you." A pause. "Tom, the dealership didn't let him leave. They pushed him out. He might not be willing to help anything connected to a John Deere dealer." "I'm not asking him to help the dealer," Tom said. "I'm asking him to help me." He wrote down the address. He got in his truck. He drove east on Hickory Ridge Road. What Dale hadn't told him, what Tom would only understand later, was why Walter Puit had been the best combine technician in 3 counties for 28 years, and what it had cost him to lose it. Walter Pruitt's place sat at the end of a gravel lane lined with old oak trees that had been there longer than the farmhouse. The house was modest and well kept. The yard was clean. Behind the house, a shop building with 2 large doors, both closed, sat in the morning light. From inside the shop, faintly, came the sound of something being worked on. Tom knocked on the shop door. The sound stopped. A moment. Then the door opened. The man who filled the doorway was 66 years old and looked like someone had taken 28 years of combine repair and compressed it into a single human form. Medium height. Broad through the chest. Hands that were enormous, not just large but tooled, shaped by decades of reaching into machinery in positions that required force and precision simultaneously. His face was the face of a man who had spent his career being right and had learned, at some cost, that being right was not always enough. He looked at Tom. He did not smile. He did not frown. He simply looked, with a direct assessment of someone who had learned to read situations quickly. "You're not from around here," Walter said. "Tom Briggs. I farm out on County Road E29, 12 miles west." "I know the place," Walter said. "Your father's farm." "My farm now," Tom said. 15 years. Walter waited. "I have an S790 that's down," Tom said. "Feeder house drive. John Deere sent 2 technicians. Senior tech called Malene. They're telling me reverser gearbox, 8 to 12 days on parts. Machine needs to go to the shop." Walter's expression did not change. "I have 300 acres that need to be worked before I can plant," Tom continued. 12 days to deadline. I cannot lose 8 to 12 days. "You want me to look at it?" Walter said. "Yes, sir." Walter looked at him for a long moment. "I don't work for John Deere anymore," he said. "I know," Tom said. "I'm not asking you to work for John Deere. I'm asking you to help me." Another pause. "Why me specifically?" Walter said. "Dale Hoffman gave me your name," Tom said. "He said you were the best combine technician in 3 counties for 28 years. Something moved in Walter's eyes at that. Just briefly. "Dale Hoffman," Walter said quietly. "He said you knew the S790 feeder house system." "I designed the diagnostic protocol for the S790 feeder house system," Walter said flatly. "For the dealership. In 2019. Tom stared at him. "You designed The diagnostic protocol that your technicians used this morning to tell you it was a reverser gearbox problem, Walter said. I wrote that protocol. I trained the technicians on it. He paused. Including Craig Sellers. The name landed in the space between them. Craig, the senior technician who had called Moline and delivered the 8 to 12-day verdict. Tom said nothing for a moment. And you don't work for them anymore, Tom said. No, Walter said. Why? Walter looked at him steadily. Because in 2021, the dealership hired a new service director who decided that technician experience was a liability and diagnostic software was an asset, Walter said. And that a 63-year-old technician who had been doing things his own way for 28 years was not compatible with the new standardized service model. He paused. They called it restructuring. They gave me a retirement package and a handshake and told me my knowledge would be preserved in the diagnostic protocols I'd written. He said the last sentence with a particular flatness that told Tom exactly how Walter felt about that arrangement. I'm sorry, Tom said. Don't be, Walter said. What's the sound? Tom blinked. The sound the feeder house drive makes, Walter said. Describe it. Tom described it. The rhythmic skip. The irregularity. The catch with every revolution. Walter listened with his eyes slightly unfocused, the look of a man running a description against an internal catalog that had been built over decades. How many hours on the machine? Walter asked. 1140, Tom said. Original feeder house drive chain? Yes. When did you last grease the feeder house drive shaft bearing, the outboard bearing, not the inboard? Tom thought about it. Fall, he said. Pre-storage. Walter nodded slowly. Not confirming. Processing. Let me get my coat, Walter said. Walter Puit had not been inside a John Deere dealership service bay in 3 years. But he had been inside combines. His own equipment, 2 older machines he maintained himself, kept his hands current. And in the 3 years since the dealership had restructured him out the door, he had quietly helped 4 farmers in Boone County with machines their dealers couldn't solve. Not advertising it. Not charging much. Just doing what he had always done, because the alternative was sitting in the house watching his knowledge go unused. He had not talked about the dealership. He had not contacted Craig Sellers or the new service director. He had not responded to the 2 calls from the dealership in the first 6 months after his departure, calls that came when specific diagnostic situations arose that the new protocols couldn't resolve. He had let those calls go to voicemail. He had not called back. But a farmer knocking on his door at 7 in the morning during planting season with 300 acres and 12 days was a different thing from a dealership asking for free consulting. He climbed into Tom's truck with his toolbox on the seat between them. He asked questions for the entire 12-mile drive. Not about the fault codes. He didn't ask about the fault codes once. He asked about the machine's history. How it had been stored. What the spring had been like, wet or dry. Whether the north fields had any particular conditions, rocks, hard spots, previous crop residue load. What the sound had done when Tom backed off the throttle versus when he increased it. Tom answered everything. Walter listened and said almost nothing. When they pulled into the field, the S790 sat where Tom had left it. Feeder house lowered, field conditioner attachment still connected, Craig's diagnostic cables still plugged into the access port. 2 things registered on Walter's face when he saw the machine. The first was a brief, involuntary softening, the expression of a man seeing something he loved after a long absence. The second was immediate professional focus, replacing the first so quickly that Tom almost missed it. Walter climbed down from the truck. He walked to the right side of the machine. He did not open any panels. He stood and looked at the feeder house drive area from the outside for 2 full minutes. Then he crouched beside the right rear of the feeder house, a specific location, not a general examination, and looked at a point where the drive shaft exited the feeder house housing toward the outboard bearing mount. He produced a small flashlight from his jacket pocket. He looked at the outboard bearing mount for 30 seconds. He stood up. He walked to where Craig's diagnostic tablet was still connected and looked at the fault code readout without touching anything. He looked at it for perhaps 15 seconds. Then he turned to Tom. "It's not the reverser gearbox," Walter said. Tom stared at him. "Craig said." "I know what Craig said," Walter said. Craig followed the diagnostic protocol correctly. The protocol led him to the reverser gearbox because the fault codes pattern matched to gearbox stress indicators. He paused. The protocol doesn't account for a specific failure mode in the outboard feeder house drive shaft bearing under 1100 hours of operation in high residue conditions. "The bearing," Tom said. "The outboard bearing is failing," Walter said. "Not failed, failing. It's developing flat spots on the inner race from insufficient lubrication over winter storage. The flat spots create the rhythmic irregularity you heard. Every time a flat spot passes the load zone, you get the skip." He paused. The vibration from the bearing irregularity is being transmitted through the drive shaft to the reverser gearbox housing. The gearbox sensors are picking up the vibration and reporting it as internal gearbox stress. Tom was absolutely still. "The gearbox is fine," Walter said. "The gearbox is reading someone else's problem." Tom looked at the machine. He looked at Walter. "You got that from looking at the outside of the machine for 2 minutes," Tom said. "I got it from the sound you described on the drive over," Walter said. The visual confirmed it. He crouched again at the outboard bearing mount and pointed with the flashlight. "You see the slight discoloration on the bearing seal? Heat. Not much, early stage. And there's the faintest trace of metallic dust at the seal edge. Bearing material migrating past the seal under stress." Tom crouched beside him. He looked where Walter was pointing. He could barely see it, a slight darkening at the bearing seal edge, and below it, on the frame rail, a faint metallic smear no larger than a thumbprint. "I would never have seen that," Tom said. "Craig wouldn't either," Walter said. "Not unkindly. The protocol doesn't include outboard bearing inspection as a step in the feeder house drive fault sequence. I meant to add it in the 2021 update." He paused. "I didn't get to finish the update." He stood up. "Can you fix it?" Tom said. "The bearing is a standard part," Walter said. "SKF spherical roller bearing, 60 mm bore. Any bearing supplier in Ames will have it. 20-minute replacement once we have the part, assuming the shaft journal isn't damaged." He looked at the bearing location. "If the journal is damaged, we have a conversation. But at 1100 hours with early-stage symptoms, the journal should be fine." Tom was already on his phone. He called a bearing supplier in Ames. They had the part. "How soon can you have it here?" Tom asked. 2 hours, the supplier said. "We can have a driver out by noon." Tom looked at Walter. Walter nodded. "Tell them noon," Walter said. "I'll be here." Tom confirmed the delivery. He hung up. He looked at Walter for a moment. "The dealership told me 8 to 12 days, Tom said. "The dealership told you what their diagnostic protocol told them," Walter said. "The protocol is good for 95% of failure modes. This was in the other 5%. He picked up his flashlight and put it back in his jacket. "The protocol can't know what it wasn't written to include." "You wrote it," Tom said. "Most of it," Walter said. "So you knew the gap." "I knew there was a gap," Walter said. "I knew I hadn't finished closing it before." He stopped. He looked at the machine. "Before I left." A silence settled between them. Tom did not push it. "I'll get coffee from the truck," Tom said. "That'd be good," Walter said. They sat on the tailgate of Tom's truck for the 2 hours while the bearing was in transit. Walter drank his coffee and looked at the fields around him, the flat black Iowa soil, the early May sky, the particular quality of light that exists in the Midwest only during the planting window, when everything feels simultaneously urgent and perfect. He had not sat in a field like this in 3 years. He had missed it more than he had admitted to himself. Tom did not ask about the dealership. He asked about the machine, about the S790's design, about what Walter had learned from the diagnostic work he'd done on the system over the years, about the failure modes that the protocol covered and the ones it didn't. Walter talked. Not expansively. He was not an expansive man. But he talked with the precision of someone whose knowledge was organized and current and had been waiting for someone to ask the right questions. At 11:58, a parts supplier truck came down the field road. Walter stood up. He was ready to go to work. The bearing replacement took 26 minutes. Not because Walter was fast. He was not fast, he was deliberate, but because he knew exactly what he was doing at every step and did not waste a single motion. He pulled the feeder house drive shaft assembly with a precision that Tom had never seen from any technician. Each fastener removed in the correct sequence. Each component set down in the exact position it would need to be in for reinstallation. No parts tray, no labeled bags, just a man who had done this so many times that the sequence lived in his hands rather than his memory. The outboard bearing came off the shaft. Walter held it up and turned it slowly in the light. The flat spots on the inner race were visible, 3 of them, evenly spaced at the points of maximum load concentration, each one perhaps 2 millimeters wide, polished to a mirror finish by the metal-on-metal contact of an inadequately lubricated bearing running under load. "There," Walter said. He held it where Tom could see. 3 flat spots. Exactly where the load concentrates at maximum drive engagement. He rotated the bearing slowly. Every time one of these passed through the load zone, the drive shaft got a micro-impulse. Rhythmic. Irregular relative to the normal drive frequency. He looked at Tom. "That's the skip you heard." Tom looked at the bearing. $20 part, Tom said. $23, Walter said. Plus the bearing supplier's delivery fee. He set the old bearing down. He picked up the new one. He installed it with the same deliberate precision, pressing it onto the shaft journal by hand first, checking the alignment, then seating it fully with a bearing driver from his toolbox. He checked the journal surface before installation, ran his thumb along it, held the flashlight at an angle to look for scoring. The journal was clean. "Shaft's fine," he said. "Good news." He reassembled the feeder house drive in the same sequence he had disassembled it. Tom handed tools when asked. Mostly he just watched. When the assembly was complete, Walter cleared the fault codes from the diagnostic system, not with Craig's laptop, with a code reader from his own toolbox that was older than Craig's entire career in the industry. He looked at Tom. "Start it," he said. Tom climbed into the cab. He started the engine. He engaged the feeder house drive. The sound was gone. Not reduced. Not improved. Gone. The S790's feeder house drive ran with a smooth, even, entirely unremarkable sound of machinery performing exactly as it was designed to perform. Tom made a slow pass across the north field, 100 yards out, 100 yards back, listening to the machine around him. Nothing. Just the sound of a combine working. He shut it down and climbed out. Walter was cleaning his tools at the tailgate of Tom's truck, working through them in the same sequence he always used. Tom walked to him. He didn't say anything for a moment. "I had 12 days, Tom said. "The dealer's diagnosis would have cost me 8 to 12 of them." Walter nodded. "You had a bearing," Walter said. The protocol pointed somewhere else. "Because of a gap you knew about," Tom said. Walter was quiet. "Because of a gap I didn't finish closing," Walter said. Tom wrote a check. Walter looked at it. "That's more than fair," Walter said. "It's less than a single day of lost planting," Tom said. "By a lot." Walter folded the check. He put it in his shirt pocket. He picked up his toolbox. He started toward Tom's truck. Then he stopped. He turned back. He looked at the S790 sitting in the north field, engine quiet now, field conditioner attachment waiting to go back to work. He looked at it for a long moment. Not at the fault. Not at the repair. At the machine. At something in the machine that only a man who had spent 28 years learning these machines from the inside could see. Some quality of design and engineering that he had spent his career in service to, that had been taken from him not by the machine's failure, but by a service director with a standardization agenda and no understanding of what was being lost. He turned back to Tom. The right rear feeder house chain tensioner, Walter said. Check it at 500 hours. The S790 tensioner spring rate is slightly underspecified for high residue operation. It'll give you the first indication about 6 months before it becomes a problem. Tom pulled out his phone and made a note. And the cleaning shoe drive belt, Walter said. Left side. The routing puts it in a slight bind on full concave adjustment. Worth checking the alignment annually. Tom noted this too. Walter looked at him. Anything else you want to know about that machine? Walter said. Tom looked at his phone, at the notes he'd just written. He looked at Walter. I want to know everything, Tom said. Walter almost smiled. I've got time, he said. Tom Briggs planted his North Fields on May 11th. 4 days ahead of the critical deadline. 3 days after Walter Puit had found a failing bearing in 26 minutes that 2 dealer technicians and a call to Moline had missed entirely. The planting went clean. Good soil conditions. The field conditioner had done its work. The corn went in at the right depth, the right spacing, the right moisture window. By the end of May, the North Fields were showing even emergence, the sight that every Iowa corn farmer works toward from the first of the year. Straight rows of green pushing through black soil, uniform, strong. Tom stood at the field edge and looked at it. He thought about 12 days. About 8 to 12 days for a gearbox. About what those North Fields would have looked like if he had accepted the dealer's diagnosis and waited. He called Dale Hoffman. The fields are in, Tom said. Good, Dale said. Walter, Tom said. A pause. How was he? Dale asked. Tom thought about it. About the 12-mile drive and the questions about soil conditions. About the flashlight and the metallic smear no larger than a thumbprint. About a man cleaning his tools in sequence at the tailgate of a truck because that was how he had always done it and some things don't change. He was exactly what he always was, Tom said. Nobody told him that. Dale was quiet for a moment. No, Dale said. Nobody did. Tom drove out to Hickory Ridge Road the following week. He brought corn from the previous year's harvest, a gesture that farmers understand and that no invoice can replace. Walter was in his shop. He accepted the corn without ceremony and set it inside the shop door. The fields, he asked. Even emergence, Tom said. Whole north section. Walter nodded. I've been thinking, Tom said. Walter waited. You designed the diagnostic protocol for the S790, Tom said. You said you didn't finish the 2021 update. The gap you knew about, the outboard bearing in high residue conditions. Yes, Walter said. How many S790s are running in Boone County? Walter thought. 14, 15. Maybe more by now. How many of them have the same gap in their diagnostic protocol? Walter looked at him. All of them, Walter said. It's the same protocol on every machine. Tom nodded slowly. Which means there are 14 other farmers out there, Tom said, who could get the same wrong diagnosis you and I just corrected. Walter was quiet. Write the update, Tom said. Walter looked at him. I don't work for. Write it and I'll take it to the dealership, Tom said. Not as a favor to them. As a service to every farmer in this county who owns an S790. He paused. You said you meant to finish it. Finish it. A long silence. Walter looked at his shop, at the tools, the organized space, the 2 combines he maintained himself. At the evidence of a man who had never stopped knowing what he knew, even when no one was asking him to use it. It'll take a week, Walter said. Take 2, Tom said. Walter looked at him steadily. The dealership won't accept it, Walter said. Not from me. They'll accept it when I show them what it would have cost me, Tom said. And when I tell them how many other farmers are one bad diagnosis away from the same situation. Walter thought about this. He thought about Craig Sellers following a protocol correctly and arriving at the wrong answer. About a service director who had decided that standardization was more valuable than the man who had built the standards. About 14 combines running in Boone County with a gap that he knew was there and had not finished closing. He thought about a farmer who had driven 12 miles to his door at 7 in the morning because there was no one else left to ask. "Sit down," Walter said. He pulled a stool from beside his workbench. "I'll show you what I have so far." Tom sat down. Walter opened a drawer. He produced a binder, worn, tabbed, filled with handwritten notes and printed diagrams that represented 3 years of continued thinking about machines he was no longer officially connected to. He had never stopped working on the update. He had just had nowhere to send it. The update was submitted to the dealership 6 weeks later. The service director, the man who had restructured Walter out, was no longer in the position. He had left for a corporate role in Des Moines 8 months earlier. The new service director was a woman named Sandra who had come up through field service and had strong opinions about the limits of diagnostic software. Sandra read the update in one sitting. She called Tom. "Where did this come from?" she said. Tom told her. Sandra was quiet for a moment. "Walter Puit wrote this," she said. "Yes," Tom said. "Walter Puit who we—" She stopped. "Yes. Walter Puit." She approved the update. She also called Walter directly. That conversation lasted 40 minutes. What was said in it was between the two of them. But the following spring, Walter Puit began spending Tuesday and Thursday mornings in the dealership's service bay. Not as an employee. Not on their payroll. As a consultant, his term, his rate, his schedule. He worked with Craig Sellers. Craig was a good technician. Walter had always known that. Craig followed protocol correctly. The problem had never been Craig. The problem had been a protocol with a gap. Now the gap was closed. The outboard feeder house drive shaft bearing inspection was added as step 7B in the S790 fault diagnosis sequence. Not because Walter demanded it. Because Tom Briggs had told Sandra what had almost happened to 300 acres of corn in Boone County on a May morning when the planting window was 12 days wide and the diagnostic software pointed the wrong direction. Walter drives past Tom's north fields sometimes in the summer. He does not stop. He does not call ahead. He just slows down on County Road E29 and looks at the corn, tall, even, dark green in the July heat, and drives on. He knows what those fields almost weren't. He knows what a $23 bearing and 26 minutes of the right hands on the right machine made possible. He drives on. The fields grow. The protocol is updated. And somewhere in a drawer in a shop on Hickory Ridge Road, a binder full of handwritten notes sits with new tabs added, because Walter Puit never stopped working on the problem, even when no one was paying him to. Even when the door had been closed behind him. Even when the handshake had been given and the retirement package accepted and the 28 years of knowing these machines from the inside had been summarized as institutional knowledge preserved in existing protocols. He kept working because the machines kept running, and the machines needed someone who knew them well enough to hear what they were saying before the software caught up. They retired the man. They kept the protocol he wrote. What they didn't understand was that the protocol was only as good as the knowledge still being added to it. And the knowledge was walking out the door. If this story stayed with you, if you've ever watched experience get shown the door while a software update got a standing ovation, subscribe to the channel and join our growing family. Ring the bell. Share this with someone who knows that some things cannot be standardized. We'll see you at the next one.